for coming. I'm so excited to have such a great crowd here again for our second Burlington Wildways Conservation and Connection Summit. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Zoe Richards, and I am directing Burlington Wildways, which is a partnership organization, which you'll learn more about in a few minutes. And I just wanted to recognize our steering committee, because we're really a group of groups working together to get a lot of good conservation, connection, and access work done in the city. So if I could just have the steering committee stand up and introduce themselves. Maybe we'll just start over here with Lauren and who you are associated with.
I'm Lauren Chakotay, and I'm the Programs Director at the Winooski Valley Park District.
I'm Alicia Daniel. I'm a field naturalist with Burlington Parks, Recreation and Waterfront.
Dan Cato, land steward with Burlington Parks, Recreation and Waterfront.
Richard Dean, I'm a Burlington City Councilor and an architect.
I'm Nina Scott, Burlington Parks, Recreation and Waterfront.
I'm Patrick Cascade, land manager at the Intervale Center.
Craig Smith, Operations Programs Director here at Rock Point.
And we are momentarily missing Matt Moore, who had to let somebody in to deliver a dryer to his house. So he'll be right back. And Nick Warner, who is the Executive Director of the Winooski Valley Park District, who for the second year in a row had a last-minute crisis and cannot be with us today. So he's sorry not to be here, and he's been really, really integral in getting us off the ground and getting our organizational structure functional. And so we're sorry not to have him today. But yeah, a lot of his work. Well, I am actually going to turn it over to Bishop Ely to welcome you all to Rock Point.
Can I come from back here, Tony? It's okay?
Sure.
Yes,
Oh, actually, no, you have to come to the front.
okay.
Sorry.
There,
We were just filmed a little for future use.
Yeah. So now I really have to be careful what I say, right?
That's for future use.
Hi, Tom Ely. I serve as the Episcopal Bishop here and for the Episcopal Church of Vermont, and I get the great joy of living on this property. And I'm in my 18th year of this ministry. And want to welcome you to Rock Point Center here. This is a property that houses our school, Rock Point School, our diocesan office, this beautiful conference center facility, and of course the beautiful property that's here. So we welcome you to this place. Some of you know that we've just finished up a major fundraising effort on the part of the Episcopal Church of Vermont. We set a goal of $1.7 million for various projects on the property, and we've raised in excess of 1.9 million, back close to 2 million. And as a result of that effort, one of the great things that happened was that a coalition formed of the Burlington Parks Association, the Lake Champlain Land Trust, Rock Point, and the City of Burlington to actually help the effort around public access and trail improvements here on this property. And so that coalition came out of our talking about what we're doing here, making this facility, this sanctuary, more accessible to people and conserving the property, placing most of the property into a conservation easement. Craig Smith's going to talk to you a little bit later about some of this, but I wanted to just highlight that and publicly thank the coalition for their effort in supporting what we're trying to do here at Rock Point, and welcome all of you to this expanding reality in Burlington about how we connect all our conservation efforts and trails, and a special thanks to Richard Dean for leading that effort through the City Council. So welcome to Rock Point, enjoy your day. I'm going to be able to stay through lunch and be part of the day that way. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bishop Ely. It's just introductions first. Richard Dean. I'm a Burlington City Councilor of just about 2 years now, and I think, as a City Council, we wrestle with a lot of difficult issues, and often we end up not, we have to make difficult votes, and so there are often people who don't see it the way we do, and we end up making decisions that make people mad. just the way it is. So this effort has been for me, something that I supported from the beginning as I was beginning my campaign back a couple of years ago. It was one of the resolutions that I was able to work together with Zoe and with Alicia to write that actually kicked this initiative off and brought us support from the city council level. And as I look back over some difficult decisions that have been made at the city council level, this has not been one of them. This has been one of the things that really has kept me going in the times that kind of I go, gee, this is not exactly what I signed up for. But I think one of the other wonderful things that we have to celebrate is a city that's looking to the future. And my role here right now is to introduce our mayor, Merle Weinberger, who I think has laid out a vision of the future Burlington, where we all have a vibrant economy, a growing downtown, jobs that support us, an innovative economy. But I think what he also understands, because he's a visionary guy, he thinks about the future. And he has been all behind the support for this initiative. We've brought him up to speed, I think, on what we've come to lately in terms of the progress we've made. We'll hear more about that today. But we have heard nothing but support coming to us from the administration. They understand how important there is the need for balance between the built environment and the natural environment. So with that, I'll turn it over to our mayor, Merle Weinberger. Thank you for being here today, Mayor Weinberger.
All right. Well, good morning. Thank you, Richard, for that introduction. It is a true pleasure to have Richard as a colleague on the City Council. I am aware he may not have realized fully what he was signing up for when we recruited him to get him involved, but we're very thankful for his service through the challenging times and through the moments of accomplishment and promise, which I think is what this morning is about. I'm super excited to be back with you. Thank you, Bishop Ely, for hosting this once again. Thank you to the whole steering committee. I'm glad we got a chance to hear a little bit about each person's role and how you've come to this work. This is a really exciting initiative, and to be back at the second annual kind of summit after a year of real accomplishment is really exciting and makes me very hopeful about where this effort is headed. I also want to look around the room, and I'm really excited to see so many members of the city team here playing a big role in the implementation. We have our Parks and Rec Director, Cindy White, here, and many members of the Park and Rec team, and I even see Scott Gustin from the Planning and Zoning team. And that is reflective, I think, of how excited the City Council and I are about this effort. So I thought I will try not to go on too long, but I do want to set a little timer for myself to ensure that, because sometimes when I get talking about these things I get excited about, suddenly the time slips away from me. I want to give it just a little bit of kind of the big picture of how the broader context that I see this work factoring into. This is all going to slide off when it goes down. And then let me speak a little bit more specifically about the initiative and some details about it and where I think it's headed and where, why I see this so important. So it is a great joy of the mayor's job, is it is, in the mayor's office, it's like the one part of city government where you get to see the whole picture of what the organization is doing, and in many ways it's really one of the few places, maybe the place in the community, where you can get you get a sense of the whole scope of what is happening within the community and how everything fits together. And this work that you are pursuing, I see as being a piece of what has been, over the last 7 years, one of the most significant initiatives that the city has pursued. And that is, we have had the opportunity over the last 7 years and had some real success working with the Parks Commission, and I see Nancy Kaplan and John Bosange here, who have been such leaders on the Parks Commission and the Parks Foundation. We have had the opportunity to really expand the public open space in Burlington, and I think it's, let me just hit the highlights of that, because I think I think we will look back, people will look back on this era and really think of it as really kind of a golden era of parks building and parks creation. We purchased and are in the process of improving a 12-acre parcel as part of the Cambrian Rise. Next to the Cambrian Rise project, we made these dramatic improvements to the urban reserve that really transformed that large section of the waterfront from this kind of post-industrial area into what is now primarily a great new park. And elements of it are actually, improved, finished parks now in a way that it was hard to imagine just a few years ago. Well, maybe we could imagine it, but it hadn't happened for a long time. We, working with Bishop Ely and this great coalition, the city's been proud to be a part of the assembly and preservation of the Arms Forest area and this incredible Rock Point Peninsula we're on, and ensuring that there will be protection and public access to these lands for, in perpetuity. We are about to open a new park on the west side of the water plant this summer that will be different than the rest of our lakefront parks. We'll have high amenity, lots of places for people to sit and enjoy trees and plantings and benches, and we see it as this great central part of that whole northern waterfront redevelopment, which has gone from being, again, this sort of post-industrial forgotten part of the waterfront to now with the sailing center and the skate park and the improved bike path and the new marina open this summer, and hopefully not far behind it, the improved Moran plant, this hub of activity on the waterfront that park will be a part of. And more, but those are the highlights. So it's been great work that so many in the room have been part of, and that I've been proud to be a part of, and I think we've capitalized on this opportunity and done a lot that will benefit the city for a long time to come. I think some people see this work as completely kind of different from, and maybe even in tension with, I think probably the way some people see it, with maybe the other huge push that the city's been engaged in for the last 7 years of this trying to achieve this vision that it envisions a Burlington where we have more neighbors, we have more people living in it, where the parking lots in the downtown get filled in with significant buildings, multi-story buildings that house businesses and people, where the other 20 so acres on Cambrian Rise are going to become the home to maybe 1,000 homes over time, where we turn a mall into a 1.5-story mall into a much more substantial mixed use community with jobs and homes and businesses. And I think to some people maybe that feels like those things feel very different from each other. To me, as I see it, these are very much bound together, these pieces of work, that I do think it is essential for us to become a bigger city, a denser city in the future, if we are going to be a place that continues to be a city of opportunity for Vermonters and Burlingtonians of all backgrounds, and for new Americans that are coming here from around the world. I think we have to be that growing city if we're gonna kind of keep our historic place in this community, and we are gonna see people of all backgrounds thrive. That success at that, though, I think to some people that sounds threatening to the Burlington we love today. I believe we can be the Burlington we are today, even more so, and be an even better place to live with an even higher quality of life if that effort is coupled with the expansion of our park system, is coupled with opening up these natural areas that are right here in this city, to access for all, making the lake and the Intervale available to people. I think we can actually very much maintain what brought so many of us here and why so many of us have stayed here. That character of Burlington can be consistent with further growth. Your effort now to get specifically to what you're underway, I think, is a huge part of that. This Burlington Wildways effort holds the promise of unlocking these stunning natural resources that we have within the city limits and just adjacent to it in a way that goes well beyond what we have today. I was just reflecting on just this kind of personal example from this past weekend that to me kind of talks to the potential of this effort. Somehow, I'm a cross-country skier. Our family loves cross-country skiing. We have lived here for almost 2 decades now. I'm well aware of the wonders of the Intervale, and yet I had not cross-country skied in the Intervale until the last couple of weekends. We always went to the golf course instead. I kind of knew it was there, but I didn't really think about it, and even though I live blocks away from it. And the last 2 weekends have just been spectacular down there. The conditions have been perfect. We saw incredible barn owl down there while we were out this weekend. I know there have been bald eagle sightings in the Intervale in the last couple of weeks. So I just, to me, what you are after here of creating maps, creating trail networks, improving signage, getting the different partners that own different elements of this open space to work together better just has enormous potential. I'm reminded of the value that other trail networks have created in the way that they have sort of captured the public imagination, whether it's the Appalachian Trail or the Long Trail or the Colorado 10th Mountain Hut system with that there is great power in doing what you're attempting to do here now, identifying, labeling, mapping, linking with maps, and we have such kind of raw materials to work with here in this community that we are, almost uniquely among significant American cities. We have 50% of our land's open spaces, about half of that wild spaces. There's such potential. I think it is an untapped potential. If a household like mine can fail to realize the potential of getting outdoors and cross-country skiing just a few blocks from our home, I think the potential of this network and coalition to reach Burlingtonians and visitors in a new way is kind of almost limitless. And I think we've gotten a great start in the work of the past year. The Parks and City team stands by ready to help this and to bring resources to it. And I just thank you on behalf of the community for having an interest in this and putting your time and energy towards it. And I think together we can really do enormous good together. I do want to call out Zoe Richards and Richard Dean for their leadership on this issue. And really note that it is rare for a city initiative to move forward from the efforts of a single city councilor in the way that this one has. That is not typically, just the nature of volunteer city councilors and full-time administration, citizen activism. The kind of leadership that Councilor Dean is showing here is really impressive, and we're fortunate to have it on the council. So, with that, I hope I haven't gone on too long. I think my timer may have disappeared on me somehow, but maybe didn't quite hit that button right. I hope, thank you again. Thanks for the opportunity to be with you.
Thank you, Mayor Weinberger. Delightful to hear your enthusiasm and vision. I'm Stephanie Lehar, and I'm the MC facilitator for the day. And it's been my delight to be the planning consultant to the steering group for this wonderful coalition for the last 2 years. And it's also been my delight just to see the political will emerge to make this happen. I was also a founder of the Burlington Conservation Board in 1988, so it's especially delightful to see how things turn and evolve over time. You know, so much emerges when there's that will and that coherence and that collaboration that happens. I wanted to also call out Kate McGowan, who's at the back of the room, and she is the director of Marlborough College's Center for New Leadership in the graduate school, and she's going to be assisting with some of the facilitation today, as well as steering group members, so thanks a lot. I wanted to just say a little bit about what's happening today, and it's not going to be a day where you sit around and just listen to people talk. And we're actually moving more than we expected, and I'll explain that in a moment. But in a moment, I'll just find out who's here. We'll do introductions in 2 ways. And then we are literally going to move the whole group. We're going to take a walk to the next building. It's not too cold to be out for just a minute.
But again, I just wanted to thank everyone, and I have the opportunity to just share with you all, or to introduce folks who are going to talk to you about some of the work that's happened over the last year for Burlington Wildways. And it's been a really exciting year for us. I think we've gotten a lot further than we ever would have imagined when we met 14 months ago. And it's been a powerful partnership. One of the things that we feel like we're doing is by all working together, we're able to kind of leverage a lot of the infrastructure that we already have in place to get the work done. But I'm just going to, for people who didn't join us last year, I'm going to give you just a tiny bit of background, which is that, all of us know that Burlington is a fantastic place. I think we know it in our bones. And part of the reason is because the wild, I think, seeps in, even when you don't really expect it. Maybe it's not always as welcome as you'd want it to be. And one of those reasons is, Burlington has amazing natural borders on 3 sides, to the west, to the north, to the east. We're bounded by Lake Champlain on the west, Winooski River on the north and the east. We have a man-made boundary on the south and southeast. And so we get a lot of this kind of natural and wild creep through the city. And here's that same thing written in a different way, right? Here are some of the statistics. Burlington is 49% open space. These numbers come off of our open space plan. They're probably a little bit outdated, but they're basically true. And half of that open space, or a quarter of the city's total land area, is in natural areas. The natural areas are about 2/3 forested and 1/3 wetland, although some of that forested is forested wetland. And the other open spaces are kind of pretty typical kind of open space. Well, actually not for a city. We have quite a lot of ag land, but we also have golf courses, cemeteries, etc. And Burlington is unusual. It is unusual. For a city of its size, having that much open space is unusual. We have a floodplain to thank for a good portion of that, but it is not just the floodplain. This whole Rock Point Arms Forest is, do we know what the total acreage of that is? 170 acres, roughly, right between the two, in the core of the city, is really fantastic. And there are a lot of other spots too, Leddy and Centennial Woods, UVM Centennial Woods, that are really significant non-floodplain open space that we have in the city. And so one of the things that we came to realize was that, we have such a gift. We have this amazing gift of open space, but many of the citizens don't recognize that we've got open space, and there are a lot of reasons for that. The open space is under multiple ownerships, and while the owners are very public friendly, we have not habitually worked together in order to kind of foster people being able to move across the landscape as they want to, or wildlife. So if you want to get from one side of the Intervale to the other side of the Intervale, there are 11 owners, and that partially explains why there's not a trail that goes from one side to the other. There is, but you kind of have to know how it's signed. When Intervale's made great progress in awesome signage on their land, but their land stops where it stops, and then you move on to some other land that isn't signed. And so, you know, one of the things that we decided to do was to try to make a difference in that. And about a year and a half ago, Richard Dean wrote a city council resolution that recognized the amazing natural areas that we have. And I'll just as a side note, not only are they natural areas, but they're ecologically significant natural areas. They're very varied, they're extremely rich. And that resolution outlined what it is that we have in the city. It recognized the problem of conservation and management, and it recognized that we don't have great access in spots to that, and we feel like that's kind of an open space justice issue for folks who don't have the ability to hop in their car and go and hike Camel's Hump. Having these amazing spaces in the city available to all citizens is a priority. So what the resolution did is it said, okay, all you land managers, go out there and do something about it. And so here we are, trying to do something about it. And in the last year, we have been meeting regularly, monthly, and the meetings are about specific items. How are we working with arms? So can we put a trail from Salmon Hole through to Ethan Allen Park? There are spaces where many of the land managers are just near each other, and so that there's a lot of benefit to it too, sharing resources, helping each other with the capacity to figure out how you might conserve a piece of land, and it's been a really creative, productive, incredible group to be involved with, and I'm lucky enough to be able to pass the baton or the clicker over to some folks who are really doing the great work on the ground. And I'll just say one last thing, which is one of the things that the structure of Wildway is really trying to focus on is the city of San Francisco has been leading a movement that is trying to have urban biodiversity and ecological function be a key tenet of sustainable cities. So when we talk about being a sustainable city, that kind of ecology, functional ecology, is part of that. It's not just green, renewable power and bike lanes, all of which are important. And they have a tagline which they call Find, Tend, and Grow the Wild in the city of San Francisco. And that really appealed to us as we kind of talked about that kind of idea. And one of the things that we're just on the front end of trying to do is help people find the wild. We just got a website up last night, thanks to Pete Land, who's here, from Tamarack Media. And we hope ultimately that you'll be able to use the website to ask the question, hey, where can I go for a walk? And what's interesting about that place? What's the story that we can learn about that place? And so this is just a little sample page over here for Ethan Allen Park with the trails, what you might find there. It's in a skeletal form right now, our website, but you should look to see it grow and become richer and more useful over the course of the next year. And I'm now going to pass on to Alicia, who's going to lead you through a little tour of some of the real successes I think we've had in the last
Give me
year.
an orientation. Is it this one?
That one.
Right.
Okay, right.
I think you have to go on that side.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Hello, and if you're jealous of the hat, the swag, it's a hack. I actually took one of the stickers and sewed it. But hats will be coming, so please stay tuned. So many of you who were here last year, or maybe who caught us at some of the NPA meetings, remember that we went on a Natural Wonders tour of Burlington, the 7 Natural Wonders. We nominated a few, but we also handed out a ballot and asked people to fill that out. And you realize we thought there might be more than 7, so we stretched the 7 concept a little bit. So we took it out to the NPAs, and Zoe and I became quite bonded over the dragon of incompatible technology that we found resides in every corner of the city. But we did get things going in every ward, and as you will notice from this slide, as we were introduced in these wards, we quickly became apparent we needed a name change, because there was kind of a garbled introduction of what used to be our old name. So we did get results, and I know you're all anxiously awaiting those. We originally reached out to the UVM Spatial Analysis Lab to look at our data. But it turned out the UVM Daycare Center was cheaper. So we had them. They mostly were able to stay within the lines, and they could count to 50. So we're looking at NPA results and results from the summit. We asked the daycare center if they could do an analysis of variance to see if there is a difference between the two groups, and the teacher said they hadn't learned that yet, which makes you wonder what they're really teaching kids at this school. But the take-home message is there are 10 natural wonders in Burlington that showed up repeatedly on ballots throughout the city, and they are in order of preference, again, based on a small sample. But Lake Champlain itself, Rock Point, the Winooski River, the Intervale, and we could combine those probably because they're so closely related. The Intervale Sea Cave, which is in Arthur Park, more or less, Centennial Woods, Oak Ledge Park, Arms Forest, Redstone Quarry. These are many of these names that we heard today from you, and last, Ethan Allen Park. So we're going to take a tour of some of these sites, and we're going to have the partners who are working in some of these areas talk about what they're up to. So we're starting in Salmon Hole. Is it you, Lauren? It's the right one that doesn't show it. It's been going off.
Yeah, so I'm Lauren Chakotay with the Winooski Valley Park District. Salmon Hole is one of the 18 parks that the Park District manages within the greater Burlington area in the lower Winooski River. I'm sure many of you have probably gone there to look at the various wildlife that's there. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the first connected trail aspect that this Burlington Wildways initiative is starting to really put together. And the trail, one. Yeah, so the trail runs from Salmon Hole. This is a screenshot from our up-and-coming website, which is really exciting. So the trail starts at Salmon Hole. There's a small parking lot just before you go over the bridge into Winooski. And the trail runs from there down along Riverwalk Trail, which is another Winooski Valley Park District managed area, to Intervale Road, and then down into the Intervale Center's trails and along the river there. Eventually connects up in this area into the Burlington, City of Burlington's Mackenzie Park, and then it still continues along the river into the Ethan Allen Homestead, which is managed by the Winooski Valley Park District, then along the 127 bike path, and eventually ending up in Ethan Allen Park. So this seemed like a really great place to start this connected trail initiative because one, the trail is already established, it's already there, even though it crosses different landowners. We didn't have to build a trail with just the simple addition of some consistent signage. We felt that people would be able to navigate from one end to the other, and it also is a pretty easy trail to walk. It's very flat and offers great views of the river, so pretty accessible to a lot of different people that maybe aren't as outdoorsy as the collective group here in the room, that I'm sure most of us have done a section, if not this whole trail before. So it'd be a good place for more people in the city to start to get that experience, and also to access the other natural areas more that connect through this trail, so more of the trails in the Ethan Allen Homestead, also the trails at the Intervale. And it also, since it crosses the various landowners, we thought that also kind of exemplified the initiative that the Wildways is trying to achieve by bringing together these different landowners, that even though we each have our own different management plans for our properties and our own different methods of managing them, we share a collective goal of keeping those areas accessible to the public and also managing for the natural resources. So if we can kind of bring those groups together to have collective conversations around best management practices and making sure that people felt very comfortable accessing that whole swath of trail would be kind of hitting one of the goals of the Wildways initiative. Oops. Yeah, so we did kind of map, do an initial map. Zoe, Kate, and I walked from Salmon Hole to the homestead, into Ethan Allen Park, actually. I had to bail at the homestead because I had to leave, but we walked the whole trail and kind of took some points along the way to start figuring out where we want to put signage so that people can easily navigate that section of trail. So now I think I'm going to pass it off to Patrick to talk a little bit more about the Intervale's involvement in that collaborative partnership.
Just to be clear, it's not signed yet.
No, that's true.
Coming soon.
Yeah. It's signed, like you can see the Winooski Valley Park District's little signage, and then once you get into the Intervale, it's signed for those, but as a consistent Burlington Wildways Trail, it's not signed for that, but coming soon.
So this work, I think, is really a good.
Actually, Patrick,
there's
I
some.
think this is my. His slides, maybe.
We can go forward and come back.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Let's
All
go
right,
forward
let's
and
do
come
that.
back. Sorry, I think that's me.
That's
okay.
So, I think the work that we've done, the Intervale has done with Wildways, is really a good metaphor for a lot of the work that Wildways is doing. In that we're a diverse landscape. We have agriculture, we have recreation, we have these trails, and then all this is on top of this really culturally significant landscape that's been recognized by humans for thousands of years to have value. And so all of this mixed together, finding the unifying themes that bring these together, conservation really sticks out. Conservation is a huge component of all these different missions that we're doing. And so this trail and having something that's connecting the different pieces of Burlington is also part of that metaphor, in that it's a common thread that's linking together these different pieces and bringing folks in, creating access. And really for us, it's helping the community recognize that conservation isn't something that just happens out in the country. It isn't something that happens outside of the city. It's integral to all of these different land uses. So this picture here kind of sums it up. We have a field of lettuce, this hedgerow, just beyond it is the river. There's a trail running through the hedgerow, and all of this is happening, with folks from the community out planting native trees that we grew down at the Intervale. So all of these things are coming together all right in one space. And so that common thread, is broadening the perception of conservation. And for us, it's getting folks to see conservation in different contexts, and then really have the opportunity to see that different landowners across the city are implementing this in a cohesive, understandable way. That we can, whether, as an example, we started a volunteer trail steward program this past summer, and for me to be able to call up and speak with somebody at Rock Point who had experience with that, and then also have some common kind of trail ethics, some common citywide conservation ethics that we can present, that people have not just seen at the Intervale, have not just seen at Rock Point, have not just seen at Burlington parks. They start to put these pieces together and say, oh, I'm experiencing conservation every day, everywhere I go. And so this picture here, I thought, kind of sums up that common thread again. This is part of our trails. This is part of this Wildways Trail. And here you have folks from the community planting trees, native trees that are improving water quality, are improving wildlife habitat. It's all these things coming together and people seeing it really, really clearly. So that conservation ethic, I think, is our biggest benefit and our biggest contribution that we get to experience. So I'll hand it over to Kate.
Sure. Okay. And the right-hand button I heard, so
So it goes the other way.
okay.
Yes.
What's that?
We're going back. So we'll go back.
Okay. Oh, right.
Because we got to go back to yours.
Okay, thank you. Almost there. Oh, right there. Yes, thank you. Okay, sorry, little challenge here. I'm going to have you guys think about what that might be and where I might have seen it. I'm Kate Cruzy. I'm a plant conservation volunteer, but as a plant, I monitor rare plants, and I'm really into telling their stories and getting landowners excited, and I realized, oh, there's so many landscape stories to tell. And Wildways would be a great group, to tell a lot of Burlington stories, whether they are natural history or human history, in a connected manner across Burlington's landscapes. And so we're going to do that via pins on the website map that Pete Land is assembling for us. And also Lake Champlain Basin Program signage, which is our federal tax dollars really proudly at work, in my opinion. So examples of the big stories to tell on the Burlington landscape. Of course, our citywide geological story of limestone outcrops surrounded by deep delta deposits. But what does this tell us about our past and present? And does everybody, a lot of us are naturalists of some sort or another in this room, so we know why that is important. But not all city residents know that. So how can we help them understand the beauty and ecological function of what we have? And then within our city, another story is we have significant forested blocks providing wildlife connectivity corridors. This is pretty unusual for a city to have, and we saw that earlier on that map. You know, there's like, especially in the New North End here, huge swaths of green open space connecting diverse habitat, and that is statewide recognized. So what is this slide here? Does anybody know?
Foxden?
Pardon me?
Foxden?
Foxden? No, this is Jill over the ground, which is a little tiny, that's just a little pile. And any other guess? Alicia, anybody else have a guess? What's that?
How big is that hole?
It's not even a hole. It's just a little pile of on the dirt, on the sand, around about my hand size. Sorry, I didn't give you.
Moose trap.
Pile of sand.
It's just a little pile of dark black grit. Good? Good? Any other guesses? Jeez, I thought. Alicia?
Is it Moran plant ash?
It is. This is Moran plant ash. Cinders. So at first you think, oh, that's just dark soil, you know, looks like it's gone through an earthworm, nice little structures. But it's like, no, it isn't. And guess where I found this? Please, just guess wildly. In the New North End somewhere. What? No, not my backyard. In a park.
Ethan Allen.
Top of Ethan Allen Park, near that Summit gazebo. And this, so it was up high here, and the gazebo is over here. A lot of people haven't hiked the trails down below. This is a trail that goes down to the east and around. And so you can see we've got limestone bedrock. I'm a plant conservation volunteer. I look at flora that grows there. It's like none of that is, it's like a misfit, and this is all thin, etc. This is a huge bank of moran plant fill. So where else is it in the city? That's a story we need to tell. And I read recently, Lake Champlain Basin Program said there was a lot has been put at North Beach, and I found some, I see where they had put it. I think they filled some of the floodplain forest. So that's a story we need to tell. And we're also redoing the moran plant. I mean, I thought that concept that's being bandied around now is pretty cool. So that's like, you know, past and future. So let's see. Then we have some site-specific stories, and Patrick has already alluded to that. We're working with Jess Robinson, our state archaeologist. There is a 1,000-year history of agriculture in the Intervale. And that's in our city. That's a story that needs to be told. Jess is going to tell not only that story, what we do know, and these are, I took a picture of this, that's my hand for perspective so you can see how petite those ears of corn are. Those are actual varieties that have been found from the Abenaki. So Jess is going to not only tell that story, but also what we do know of, and to help us imagine what it may have looked like back in the day of the lifeways of the Native Americans there. And then Craig Smith very nicely asked me to be on the signage committee. This is how I got all started in this landscape storytelling kick. Because Lone Rock Point is developing interpretive signage, welcome signs, and what are the important stories to tell? This is a rare plant, the longleaf bluet out here, and this is one of the sites. There's some longleaf bluet there and some other rare plants as well. But I think another reason we want to help tell the stories is educated visitors help steward such sites. If people don't know what the rare plants look like or what's special, they can't help you protect it. I think most people want to help and they want to steward, but so a lot of our destruction happens out of ignorance. Where should we tell the story that the first Europeans recorded? I think this is a great story. What they first reported seeing, which was Burlington Bay, was this huge crescent of sand with bluffs with very tall pines on top, from Lone Rock Point down to Oakledge Park. That's a pretty cool story to tell. And is it part of the restoration story, which I think Nina may be talking more about, for the urban reserve? Because I know some tree planting has been done there, which could bring back some of, and that's the story, is like it used to be, it's now black locusts or highly disturbed woods on those bluffs, but the city is replanting some of what used to be there, and I think people would benefit from knowing that. So, the last thing we want is what stories are we missing? And especially of the hidden human footprint. We have so many naturalists at UVM and just within our, there's a lot of natural history information. There's not the personal stories of natural history that we would benefit from, but it's the human footprint, the hidden human footprint on the landscape. Where do you see the barbed wire? Or at Derway Island, there's chestnut fence posts left from probably the 30s. And they're still there and they're still very strong. And that's a story that is a real connection to the past. And there's many others like that. The bank dumps at Arthur Park that show up you see them in the springtime. It's like, how did we handle our solid waste historically? Now we do one thing. What did we used to do, and how can you still see it? Lone Rock Point has one too that you walk through. So at your place at the table, when we get back to the other room, there's paper and pens in the middle. And we want you to share any hidden stories that you may have about Burlington you think we should know about. That's it. I'm not sure who is. Oh, okay.
Nick Warner, the executive director of the Winooski Valley Park District, who unfortunately couldn't make it here again this year, was going to talk a little bit about Derway Cove, one of the Park District's newest acquisitions. So I'm going to do my best to kind of try to cover for him, because I only found out I was doing this at 8 o'clock this morning. And I did not have a lot of personal involvement in this acquisition, but the Park District is a really small office, so I have been around for it. So I do apologize. I'll probably read his slides like almost verbatim. And if you have other questions about this, you can contact Nick at the Park District. But Derway Cove is just a kind of a fun story to tell about our recent acquisition. So it is the former Rivers End Marina that operated at the mouth of the Winooski River for over 40 years. And then this past fall, the Park District, with project partners of the Lake Champlain Land Trust, we purchased this site with the help of VHCB and Conservation Legacy Fund support. And I believe it's just under 3 acres worth of property that we acquired. The site, as you probably can imagine, regularly flooded and caused different issues from that, destroying buildings and also silting in the basin for the marina, causing all sorts of problems. So it seemed like a natural fit for when the property was to be sold for the Park District to try to acquire it. Mainly because it is also connected to Durway Island natural area, which the Park District currently manages, and which I think was several people's in this room, their special place that they talked about earlier before we came over here. So it adds to that section of preserved area in the city, and just for perspective, there's the bike path bridge and then Delta Park over on the other side in Colchester. Yeah, so it'll extend the size of the park. So these are just some nice pictures of Durway. And so with this acquisition, it's now 2 full miles of shoreline from the river mouth to the southeastern edge of Durway Island that is now conserved permanently. So big ecological impact. I think the next few slides are some maps of sort of the why what makes this a special area. So we do plan to renaturalize it. We're with the help of FEMA, we're removing all the buildings and hardscape down there. There'll still be public access to it, and we're still in the development stages of figuring out what that exactly looks like, but it'll be a really nice wildlife viewing, potentially fishing access as well. This is kind of hard to see the little pictures down on the side, but you can just see how kind of diverse this area of the river is. And how so these are just these I believe Nick took off of BioFinder online, which we use a lot and is a really great tool for helping us establish some standards for the parks that we manage. So you can see that now it's down in this picture, the green one. This little section was not currently like part of the habitat block, so now a little bit more of that currently is with our acquisition. So these are just some of the pre-development. This is what the site kind of currently looks like with the buildings. And as I said, with the FEMA grant, we will be removing those, including the docks system, which we plan to repurpose into potential boardwalks at some of our other parks. So those will all be gone. And these are just some kind of conceptual drawings of what the park might end up looking like, but we do plan, as I mentioned, to renaturalize it, so we'll be doing a big tree planting down there once all the buildings and stuff are gone. And we do still plan to have some sort of access, potentially car access for bringing small boats down to it, but possibly also just pedestrian foot traffic access. That will sort of all depend as we go forward, and I'm sure that the Burlington Wildways group and some of the other partners here in the room will kind of help us through that planning process and phase. Some challenges that we might face of funding, political acceptance, and a myriad of other things. I think later on we will be talking some more about some challenges that kind of are similar to what this group might face in the future.
And can I just add one thing? I know one of the things that Nick really talked about was, that was a much loved marina, and so there was some grief, I think, about switching from being a marina and those were good questions I think the mayor brought up about the kind of loss. But it was a really natural switch because it changed hands. The likelihood that there'd be any capacity to ever dredge there again and keep it marina was next to none. And so, and many of you folks probably know more about that than I do, but that its time, its conversion was, I think, inevitable, because it just could not stay as marina.
Yeah. So the pictures that you saw before of the flooding, it would be silted in and then having to dredge to remain access. So that just, really wasn't going to be feasible anymore. But our hope is that, still keeping it a part of a public accessible space, people can still have a connection to it and still go down and enjoy that section of the river. So if you have any further questions about this project, I would highly recommend contacting Nick, and he does apologize for not being here. I can try to answer any questions, but.
Will that be open to paddlers at all?
Potentially, that's a thought, but we're not 100% sure what the final outcome is going to be. That's a hope.
Dan Cahill, Land Steward of Parks and Rec. Wild shorelines. I'm going to be brief about this, but this is a really kind of a significant place where we're starting to spend some more time and energy in the Wildways group and at the city, thinking about how we interpret our shorelines in Burlington. I think Kate really kind of told an interesting story about kind of pre-settlement what Burlington looked like on our shoreline. Our sandy beaches are rare natural community types, and for the most part, people interface with those when they go to North Beach, when they go to Oak Ledge and swim at Blanchard. But it's also important that we have our wild shorelines where we don't have beach type activities where we're combing and doing those other things. So in the Wildways group, we've been spending some time thinking about those designations because, one, it's an important part of our natural history, but those sites are also home to many rare, threatened, or endangered plant species, as well as having a lot of wildlife habitat and wildlife corridors. So I'm going to be really brief about wild shorelines. But if you have any questions about wild shorelines, let me know.
Okay, I'm gonna pass out something that just illustrates that my topic is kind of how does conservation and public access come together? And if you could just pass them around and the excess somehow come back to Cindy.
If you stand up here,
sure. Yeah. Excellent. So like I said, welcome to Rock Point. I've lived here parts of 63 out of 64 years of my life. So I'm in danger of not being focused. As a result, I've really just decided to focus in a lot on a specific example. I've given you the handout so you can see what some of the tensions are when we're trying to do both conservation and guided public access. We live in that tension, and as a spiritual community, we believe there's a resolution in that tension if you hold those things and honor them both as meant to be there, that there's some creativity and some reconciliation that can come out of that. And so I think Rock Point right now is at a story of how does the community of Rock Point include the community that's around us, so that we have a hospitable, open door to that community, and we can enlist that community in taking care of Rock Point. I think that's the overall goal for each part of this Wildways system. And so I'm just going to focus on one particular, for instance, having to do with Crag VT. So there's Rock Point. You can see that edge of the cliff exposed right there. Yeah, that's the rock climbing place for Crag. Here's the entryway that takes you down to the thrust fault, the natural wonder of the world that we have here on our property. And Here's the effect of erosion on that walkway that takes us down to that one natural wonder of the world. And here's a greeting kiosk that says, as you come onto this property, we welcome you to join us in taking care of this place. So here's a beautiful view of where we are right now, over here, in this building of the point and of the peninsula. We have two parts to Rock Point, the part that's west of the tracks and the part that's east of the tracks. So we're on the other side of the tracks is on the other side of the tracks, and this side of the tracks is rules around how do we do sanctuary. How do we create a sense of this being like a cathedral, open to everybody, but there being definitely some guidelines about how we want to share that property and have people walk on the land with us, and how can we accomplish it. Again, you'll see at the far end is where we're going to be discussing the route that's we wound up for Craig's. Here's the Holy Trinity at the it's important that when you're negotiating things that you keep your sense of humor and perspective, and we thank God for the abundance of that with our partners along the way. This is actually Zoe's family on New Year's Day. She's responsible for the ritual. You're going to have to ask her about details about this. A wedding, okay. All right, that's a perfect thing. It's a both and kind of thing. All right, goes perfect. What we're trying to do here at Rock Point is develop this idea that Rock Point isn't the school, it's not the diocese, it's not just that place that I go to drink beer and have a nice view, it's not the diving place. It's a place that is open to the community. It is a place of gathering, as it has been since the Abenakis used it as a gathering place. So it's got a long, long heritage we're trying to keep alive. Here's, again, the whole peninsula. We've got two different conservation easements. One, Burlington City Parks and Recreation is really helping us in terms of developing a network of trails here. And the Lake Champlain Land Trust holds that. And we are now in the process of closing in a couple months on a 93-acre one here on what I call the sanctuary, the other this side of the tracks. So this is our vision. How do we be a welcoming sanctuary for spirituality and creativity, community, education, training, and environmental stewardship? How does that vision get translated into, connecting with the rest of a trail network in Burlington and really making people appreciate some of those aspects of this being a place of restoration, this being a place of encounter and communion, this being a place of transformation. Okay, so we're going to get into CRAG. CRAG is the Vermont climbing group. They are dedicated to finding accessible places to climb. Here's the situation. We came into contact with them about 3 years ago. And this was the starting situation. I'll just read it. Our property manager discovered some unknown climbers had set a route with hardware in the face of the cliff at the very tip of Rock Point. No one asked. It just appeared. This triggers, of course, off predictable responses. Here we are, fear of safety, lawsuits, anger at violation and trespass, frustration at not having the ability to converse or even know who to talk to about this. So, what's the first step we take? Well, we asked around. Somebody said, well, go to, maybe Outdoor Gear Exchange. They have connections to the community, and maybe they'll put us in touch with someone, and I don't know exactly how, but eventually a couple leaders from CRAG came to us and said, we'd like to talk to you about a climbing at Rock Point. So with that conversation joined, we began to talk about how that might happen. So I would call this next stage engaging the tensions. not, when you don't know too much, it can be a real asset. We didn't know anything about how to do this. We asked lots of questions. We voiced all of our legal, safety, management, and environmental concerns, back and forth. Rock Point got very clear in this process of talking about it that we didn't want to manage a climbing program, no thank you, for lots of reasons. But we were ready to try an experiment. And if we have groups that come on to Rock Point who are ready to manage the program that they're bringing on to Rock Point themselves, not we helping them do it, but hosting them to do it, then that we could move forward. And so we really developed a partnership in getting into these details and getting into the tensions and kind of hammering them out. Found that in Massachusetts they had sort of a model of how another group that had done this gave us a little bit of courage. We moved forward and began to get the sense of confidence that this could be done and address all of our concerns. So the process back and forth with boards, our board, their board, back and forth, some lags and all of that stuff. Took about 2 years, and we came up with a letter of agreement. And an agreement about how Crag would become part of this Rock Point community in terms of participating in work, in terms of a financial contribution, in terms of encouraging people who were part of things, part of their organization to join in the land stewardship. So we took each step slowly, wondered along the way whether we were going to get anywhere. We had an environmental assessment report. By this time, Wildways was underway, and we knew who to take it to. So we took it to Alicia and to Kate to help us to review that, to make sure where we were putting this climbing place wasn't a place that was going to take care of the property and take care of the rare plants and all of that stuff. And then we named other things about capacity and how many people can be on there at once, and a kiosk got built and a place to sign in and somebody at Crag to manage it and all of those things. Slowly came together. But the result is that we established good communication. We learned to ask the questions and explore frankly where the tensions were. And that kind of candid conversation really, I think, allowed that tension to get resolved in a positive way. Lots of good news, I think, that's come out of this, and that I think we can share with others. And that is that the climbers are actively participating in the stewardship of the program. This is the first group I've seen with the outside where they said, we're ready to do this, and this is what we want to do, and this is the day we're going to do it. And I didn't have to jumpstart them, and that was just a miracle of no small order. Climbers contribute now, I think, to being part of that community that looks out and can talk to other people who are on the property and engage them. Our overhead gets kept to a minimum because it's managed by a nice site volunteer, Peter Clark, very responsible. And we can work from what we have at Rock Point as a common land use plan, so we know what work we want to do and do together, and can turn people loose toward helping with that. So what started out as a problem and as a kind of, either we're going to do this or we're going to do this, became, and all the fears and anxieties and involves that, to me, has turned into a very strong partner relationship. That's the good news. That's the part, the confidence that I have that I didn't have when we first started the conversation. Trust grows and it takes time, step by step, and that we've built a partnership through that process of living in that tension. And because it's formed out of tension, it's a whole lot stronger. So now we're to the point where I should show you. That's the climbing route. It's not. There's the kind of, I'm sure, how do you pay attention to this, to where your foot's going to go when you're up there, right? They produced a wonderful annual report, which shows just how they get the word out and enlist the climbers in helping to steward the line, follow the guidelines, and all of that stuff. So they've been very good, and actually we've learned a lot from them about how to reach out to the community. It's been very, very beneficial. And they're now taking their show on the road, and we have much clearer sense of responsibilities and how we share them. They're now teaching other climbing groups how to do this in other states. So, you know, I wouldn't have guessed that a couple years ago. Thanks.
Yes, we believe in talking inside here. Oh, Stephen, you're
I'm going to do a brief introduction about Arms Forest and specifically zeroed in and around management plans. So to take care of our wonderful natural areas throughout the city, one of the important steps in doing that is having clear and cohesive management plans that are up to date. So we're always kind of working on that process. It's always kind of evolving. And a really exciting piece of that we've kind of honed in on this year, serendipitously with the update of the Arms Forest management plan that we're working on, the state has released the Vermont Conservation Design. And so we've decided to kind of use that as one of the, not necessarily a template, but as a guide for how we look at management plans and then how we then build that out to the greater community. So really what it's helped us see is that what we are doing in one specific natural area really fits in to what we're, decisions we're going to make as a community at large. So Alicia's going to give a little bit more context to that.
Terrible cough. I've gotten water, thank you. I think I just got hot. But I'm ready.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry about that cough. So we have a couple of people here who were instrumental in designing this approach to assessing landscapes, and Jens is one of them, and Bob Zano is the other one. So this is going to be a quick run through of how we're using this in Burlington, and if you want to know more, definitely talk to them. So just for orientation, here's Arms Forest. Not everyone knows, where this is in the city. It's kind of a hidden jewel. And we decided, thank you, as we're updating the management plan, that we wanted to start out with ecological mapping. Now, we knew ahead of time that Arms was a really special environment. We knew that there were interior forest species like scarlet tanagers. We knew there were uncommon plants like yellow lady slippers. We knew that there was a vernal pool where spotted salamanders were breeding. We knew there were state significant natural areas and that there were a lot of large mammals that visited this property like foxes and fishers and coyotes. Feel free to look at either side of the slide. So just for context, Vermont Conservation Design allows you to look at landscape level features, at the abiotic features of a community, and then you can work up into natural communities and species and other components. So we ran Arms Forest through this filter. Not surprisingly, it checked almost every box. It was, as we suspected, a really unusual and diverse place. And we think that this is due to the fact that it has these limestone outcrops that Kate referred to, and they're skirted with a large delta from the glacial Winooski River. So they have very, very rich soils and pretty acidic soils. So it wasn't enough for us just to run this through a Vermont Conservation Design filter. We actually have people on the ground field checking this, and so here's Jeff Severson and me in our natural environment, and Kate looking at rare plants. Sophie Mazuida has been running the mammal tracking project. So we know an awful lot about the specifics of Arms. And people consider it a wilderness setting in an urban environment. It really isn't a unique property. And it checks, again, all these kind of large-scale features and then all these smaller specific features. So we knew arms was special, but was it unique? So it raises the question, how many arms does the city have? You know, we don't know until we look, right? So we rounded up the usual suspects, and we put them in a larger table, and we started to compare 26 properties to each other using Vermont Conservation Design. So it gave us a very specific way to look at these properties and find out kind of how they, what they have, what we have to lose, really, what's unique about them. So just quickly, I'd like to talk to you about 3 of the properties that we looked at. Here's Arms. Does anyone know this one? Letty Park. Ethan Allen, yes. So all in close proximity, all offering some unique qualities. I'm going to start with Letty. I want to give a caveat. I know that Letty has its own friends group. And how many of you are huge fans of Letty Park? Would you put it on the 7 Wonders? No one did, really. It didn't pop up as a 7 Wonder. And from an ecological standpoint,
It's a rare plant.
Not that rare.
this is kind of what people talk about when you talk to them about Letty Park. They talk about recreation, they talk about poison ivy, they talk about the intersection of those 2 things, and the white pines that are planted, and it just doesn't really rank at the biotic level. It turns out, however, though, it does have an interesting role to play from a landscape scale level. So again, it is part of this giant delta. So that delta is outlined in blue here, but it's also all that green over there and extends further into Colchester. But when you look closer, so it's flat. It's a delta. It's deep sands. It has some natural streams running through it that are significant from the Vermont Conservation Design standpoint. But even as importantly, it's a piece of that giant delta that's still open. So deltas, it turns out, are fantastically easy to build on. And as a result, we've done a great job of that. But if you think about climate change, if you think about natural communities, if you think about animals moving around in the landscape, Letty offers the opportunity for rare communities like, pine, oak, heath, sapling forests, some of their members to reappear in our Burlington landscape in a way that this neighborhood does not. Ethan Allen Park. We had higher hopes for Ethan Allen Park. It has wildflowers. A lot of them are tucked down behind the tower along that ridge line because they're protected by talus, which leads into this story. So Ethan Allen is an outcrop of this same dolostone that's famous here at Rock Point. So it's this same bedrock. But it did not check many boxes. It has a few rare and uncommon plant species, a little bit of other stuff going on with surface water. Why not? Why isn't Ethan Allen Park more like Rock Point? So we notice immediately that it's isolated. It's cut off from the surrounding landscape. Rock Point, Arms Forest, animals, plants, they can flow across here and they can come and go from this environment. But also, Ethan Allen Park has a history of being an extremely popular destination. At the turn of the last century, people flooded out to Ethan Allen Park. And if you talk to them, they'll tell you that their grandmothers, or even up until more current days, they'd pick wildflowers for May baskets. The aesthetic was really different, and the ethic was too. So the aesthetic was that people had been going to picnic in cemeteries, and then the idea came into fashion that you could do this in wild places. But people wanted them groomed, and they wanted to be able to take stuff. So just to Sum it up. Rock Point, so saturated with layers that you find in Biofinder that you can't even hardly see it on the map. Arms Forest, also deeply layered. Levy Park, again, those delta significant features. Ethan Allen, some rare plants. So if you think of the cake again, Levy Park, you get the base of the cake. Ethan Allen, you get some of the rare plants. Arms Forest is the whole cake. So how many arms does Burlington have? It turns out it's a little grammatically awkward, but we have 1 arms. We really only have 1 arms. And I'll leave you with some wildflowers that people took pictures of. These were all found in Arms Forest this spring by the Vermont Master Naturalists. I'll tell you what they all are if you really want to know. Fringed polygala, very small, beautiful. They also call it gay wings. Hepatica, columbine. Does anyone know this one? I love this one. You should know this one, Craig. I need to teach you this one.
Oh, yeah, please do.
It's called mitrewort, bishop's cap.
Oh,
So, yes. This is leatherwood. This is large flowered bellwort. Lady slippers, trillium. So, well, let's back up on that one just for a second. So Arms is a true 7 wonder. We really are lucky to have it. And I just want to, say how excited I am that Wildways is, and parks, that all of us are paying attention to these things. So I don't know who's next. Oh, you? Yay, right back to parks. Thank you.
All right, so I'm Cindy White, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Waterfront.
Nina Spivey, Parks and Planner, Burlington Parks, Recreation, Waterfront.
That's right. So we get to talk about the Urban Reserve and Oak Ledge Park, but just to start really quickly on our system themes, this came up with our master plan, and the Urban Reserve and Oak Ledge touch on many of our themes, from the people with all the various partnerships that we have, to connecting. The bike path connects to all the places, stewardship, taking care of the spaces. So again, those are system things that drive what we do. And so now we're going to jump right in to keep on time. So I have Urban Reserve, and Nina's going to do Oak Ledge. So Urban Reserve is kind of interesting. We have meadow restoration here, but it's also a story of resiliency. Because if we decided to take the Urban Reserve and bring it back to what it was, the sheep pilings in some areas, we would basically say, here, lake, you can have the land back. Well, we're not that generous. We want to keep the land. So part of that is resiliency. How do we make it more resilient, since at some point, some of that was filled in and created land for the city. 1980s was where a lot of it started, when we decided to, I believe that was the time of Bernie, was the idea of how do we take this post-industrial area and make it special as a waterfront. So paths were put in through the waterfront there, and then we're going to fast forward, and all of a sudden that path was in a situation where it was now falling apart, and the city had to decide what to do. How do we approach this? A task force was developed. I know John Bassan was a part of that task force in the beginning, of thinking about what are we going to do about this bike path that's deteriorating, but yet our waterfront from the 80s became very vital to the part of what was Burlington. This is our area right here, is that Urban Reserve, and there was this kind of idea of like, do we create some mini parks along the way as part of that bike path? And this is what we had to do in order to do all that. There was, I'm not sure what the tonnage was, but all the concrete and asphalt that had to come out of the Urban Reserve. Yes, we weren't willing to give it all back to lakes. We brought in some nice clean fill. And then we started looking at these ideas of mini parks. But here we have a newly planted meadow. And now, what does meadow mean? Meadow means different things to different people. And so that's where we started getting a little bit of the conflict, is we started looking at it from a conservation aspect. But then there's some that will be thinking of a meadow as something that's, shorter grass. So that was a kind of beginning of the conflict, because conservation isn't always clean. Sometimes it gets a little bit messy. Here's was an image by Sasaki of what a meadow might look like. You might have some higher growing plants on the edges, makes it very resilient. Closer in is lower, where you might be able to still throw a blanket down, but it's still resilient. We don't have any irrigation out here. There's no ways to water that land. Oh, there's a new picture in there. I'm like, oh, there's a new picture since I last looked at this one. So again, that's some of the areas in there with pollinator species. We are trying to get Bee City designation. That's something Dan is working hard at to try to get that there. Just giving a few views of what the area looks like. And this right here is kind of what it looked like last year, and we're still trying to figure it out. And again, that sense of resiliency, but also it's a place that people like to go to. So how do we, you can see the first right in through here, we've got some of the higher plants. You can see the edges of the higher on the second area in, and then closer in is that lower level. It was high up early on, and so we were realizing some plants in that lower meadow area were coming high. So Dan and his volunteers were pulling some of those to try to find that happy medium. And then this upcoming summer, we're going to try to see, is there a way to create a sort of smaller crescent area that's maybe even a little bit lower grass. I might look at maybe mowing potentially at the level which we mow along the bike path to try to balance that. How do we make it resilient, but still a place that people want to come to? But we find the challenges, again, when you have no irrigation, which you can see a little bit in through here, is getting some of that compaction. All of a sudden you're starting to see some dirt spots. And when we kept it at about a 6 to 8 inch area as one form of a meadow, you don't see that. We don't get people cutting through the spaces as much. So that's a little bit about the urban reserve and how we're trying to make it resilient. We weren't willing to give it back by bringing it to where it had originally been. And again, balancing conservation out on the very visible part of our waterfront.
Great. Thanks, Cindy.
Yep.
All right, so continuing to talk about a change in management and sort of balancing what the uses are with the ecology. Oakledge Park is another good example. Oakledge sees a lot of different uses. There's a treehouse there's the beach, there's courts for recreation, and then there's also this softball field, which is actually in a wetland. So not a great place to play softball. And looking at our parks master plan and also doing a siting study in this area, we looked at the different uses, but we also looked at the way that the ecology was functioning, and recognized that this wasn't really going to work out in the long run, and people weren't really using it anyway. So really starting to think about a change in management for this site, to really start enhancing that ecological function. And while we were having these thoughts, Dan and our conservation team and our maintenance crews started thinking about a different way to manage it through sort of a no-mow plan. Minimal, stop mowing, see what happens. And the timing was really great when Audubon Vermont and Gwen came to us with an idea to kind of create more bird habitat and really educate the public on the importance of bird habitat in Vermont. So we applied for a grant and we got some funding to do a planting here at these two different locations where it's really wet. And we got the grant and we managed to get a group of over 120 volunteers to come out and plant over 1,000 trees and shrubs. So here are some pictures of the volunteer groups working together. And then also touching on Burlington Wildway themes of signage and educating the public. Gwen and her team have done an awesome job of putting together these signs that really talk about the benefits of this kind of management. Sometimes you can't tell, that it's actively managed when it looks a little messy or when you're not mowing, so that's when the signage becomes really important. And it also lists the plants that are here, so shrubs like silky dogwood and trees like serviceberry and red maple. So if people are looking for bird habitat plants to plant in their own neighborhoods, they can see exactly what those are. This sign will be going out this spring. We're going to be putting one at Letty Park as well. So there is some wildlife benefit there. And there's also going to be other signs along Burlington Greenway where we've put in some native plants sort of to celebrate and to inform the public on those. That's it.
Well, we have pretty much come to the end of our little morning's tour of Burlington. One of the things that you notice with the open space is that it's mostly in the center, but there are a few corridors that we've really noticed that are pretty nifty and important. So I'm just going to touch on things that that are aspirational for us, is trying to really think about and protect there's a little Inglesby Brook corridor that runs on the south end. And these are shots taken from a wildlife camera right next to Champlain School. Next time you're stuck in traffic on Pine Street cursing, think, hey, there's actually something going on. Here, these are a pair of green herons that we caught over and over and over again. They could be nesting out on Four Brothers. They tend to nest in their own territory, but clearly they're using this as territorial grounds. It's the most, there's a strange sewage outfall, not sewage, stormwater outfall right near there. It's a really scrappy piece of land, but it really does serve as a corridor. There's also a male wood duck and a female wood duck right there as well. There's also a really neat little kind of walking corridor that goes through Crescent Woods, which most people don't know about, which is off of Shelburne Road, runs along that Inglesby Brook corridor, and you can cut over to UVM's Redstone Quarry, which is another natural area. And there's just some really neat little byways like that in the city, and those are things that we kind of aspire to in the future that'll allow people to really get out into our wildlands more and more. But with that, I think we've done a really you've gotten the full tour of Burlington.